I thought I was sterile, but got pregnant. Then found out. My boyfriend and our roommate had hooked up behind my back. Now they both want to be in the baby's life. But I have a shocking decision to make. Hey Reddit, I'm in a seriously complicated situation and could really use some advice. For privacy, let's call me Aria. I, 24F, have been with my boyfriend, Robbie, 25M, for about 3 years now. We met during orientation week of grad school, bonding over our shared love of obscure indie bands and terrible B movies. I remember the first time I saw him, standing in the corner of a crowded mixer, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. He was wearing a faded t-shirt for a band I loved, but never met anyone else who'd heard of. We ended up talking for hours that night, missing most of the orientation events. By the end of the week, we were inseparable. Robbie's brilliant and driven, with a wicked sense of humor that never fails to make me laugh. But he can also be possessive and has some trust issues stemming from a bad breakup in his past. His ex cheated on him with his best friend in undergrad, and it really did a number on him. It took a long time for him to open up to me about it, but once he did, I understood a lot of his behavior better. We're both grad students now, living together in a house near campus with 2 other roommates. One of those roommates is Caleb, 26M, who's in a band with Robbie. Caleb moved in with us about 18 months ago when our previous roommate, Sarah, moved out to live with her girlfriend. Caleb and Robbie have been in a band together since their freshman year of college. They have this crazy chemistry on stage. It's actually how Robbie and I first got together. I went to one of their shows, and seeing Robbie up there, completely in his element, I was just blown away. Caleb's the laid-back, easygoing one, almost to a fault. He's the kind of guy who's always down for a 3 a.m. taco run or an impromptu jam session. The 3 of us hang out together all the time, watching movies or playing music in the basement. Here's where things get tricky. For the past year, I've occasionally been sleeping with Caleb. Robbie knows about this and was initially okay with it. We had what you might call an open arrangement, but really it was just me and Caleb hooking up sometimes. Robbie and I have always been each other's primary partners. The thing with Caleb started innocently enough. One night when Robbie was out of town at a conference, Caleb and I stayed up late talking and drinking wine. We got onto the topic of past relationships, and I ended up telling him about my unusual anatomy. More on that in a bit. He was so understanding and kind about it, not weird at all. One thing led to another, and we ended up hooking up. The next morning, we both felt terrible and agreed to tell Robbie right away. To our surprise, Robbie wasn't angry. He admitted he'd always been a little curious about opening up our relationship. We talked it through and agreed on some ground rules. It was supposed to be casual and fun. For a while, it worked great. Robbie and I were still deeply committed to each other, but I'd occasionally sleep with Caleb when the mood struck. Robbie even said it turned him on a little to think about. Now, the real complication. I was born with some unusual anatomy. Without getting too technical, I have both male and female reproductive organs. I've always identified as female, but I present as somewhat androgynous. Growing up was challenging, to say the least. Kids can be cruel, and I never quite fit in anywhere. My parents were amazing, though, always supportive and letting me figure out my own identity. I had a lot of doctor's appointments growing up, more than I can count. They all told me the same thing. I was completely sterile. I'd never be able to have biological children. It was hard to hear as a teenager, but I came to terms with it. When I met Robbie and things got serious, I told him about my condition. He was incredibly understanding, said it didn't change how he felt about me at all. Because of my supposed sterility, Robbie and I have never used protection. We actually got pretty into the idea of risky sex, knowing there wasn't actually any risk. It became a bit of a kink for us, if I'm being honest. Well, surprise. Turns out I'm not as sterile as we thought. I just found out I'm pregnant. I'm freaking out and have no idea how to handle this. I found out yesterday when I went to the doctor for what I thought was a stomach bug. I've been feeling nauseous and tired for weeks, but I just chalked it up to stress from grad school. When the doctor came back with the test results, I thought she was joking at first. But nope, there it was in black and white. Pregnant. I'm still in shock. Part of me is excited. I never thought this would be possible for me. But I'm also terrified. Robbie and I are still students. We're not ready for a baby. And what if this blows up our whole living situation? I'm also worried about how this will affect things with Caleb. Even though it's casual, I do care about him as a friend. I don't want things to get weird or for him to feel pushed out. And what if he thinks the baby could be his? I'm 99% sure it's Robbie's. The timing doesn't line up for it to be Caleb's. But will they believe that? Lately, I've noticed Robbie seeming a little more tense about the whole arrangement with Caleb. He'll make little comments or jokes that have an edge to them. I've been meaning to check in with him about it, but I've been putting it off. And now this bombshell. I have no idea how to even begin this conversation. Robbie and Caleb are out of town for a few days playing some gigs with their band. They'll be back tomorrow, and I know I need to talk to Robbie right away. But how do I even start? I keep trying to imagine how this conversation might go, but my mind just goes blank. Do I just blurt it out? Do I ease into it? Should I tell Caleb separately or let Robbie decide how to handle that? I'm sitting here in our empty house, my mind racing. I've always been the type to overthink everything, and now I feel paralyzed. I know I need to face this head on, but I'm scared of losing everything we've built. Robbie and I have talked about the future before, in vague terms. We both want to finish our PhDs, maybe do a postdoc or two before settling into academic careers. We've talked about marriage as a someday thing, but not anytime soon. Kids were never really on the table, given my supposed sterility. And now everything's changing. I'm going to be a mom. Robbie's going to be a dad. Or is he? Will he even want to be? What if he freaks out and leaves? What if he doesn't believe it's his? I'm also worried about how this will affect my studies. I'm in the middle of my dissertation research. How am I supposed to do fieldwork while pregnant? Will I have to take time off? Will I lose my funding? There's so much uncertainty. So many questions swirling in my head. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, and I have no idea what's waiting at the bottom. Any advice on how to approach this would be so appreciated. How do I break this news to Robbie in a way that won't completely freak him out? How do we navigate this new reality? I've never had to have such a serious, life-changing conversation before. I'm terrified of saying the wrong thing and ruining everything. Thanks for reading all of this, if you made it this far. Just writing it all out has helped a little. I'll update when I've talked to Robbie, assuming I don't chicken out and run away to join the circus instead. Update 1. Hey everyone, first, thank you all so much for the advice and support on my original post. It really helped me get my thoughts together and gave me the courage to face this head on. I promised an update, so here goes. Robbie and Caleb got back from their gigs late last night. I was a nervous wreck all day waiting for them. I must have rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times, but of course, when the moment came, all my carefully prepared speeches went out the window. When they finally got home, Caleb went straight to bed, but Robbie could tell something was up with me. He knows me too well. Says I get this little crease between my eyebrows when I'm worried about something. We went up to our room and I just came out with it. I told him I had some unexpected news, that I'd seen a doctor while they were gone and found out I was pregnant. For a minute, he just stared at me, totally silent. I could almost see the gears turning in his head as he processed what I'd said. Then he asked if I was sure. I nodded and showed him the test results I'd gotten from the doctor. What happened next? Well, it wasn't what I expected. Robbie burst into tears. Not angry tears, but these big, gasping sobs. I've never seen him cry like that before. Between sobs, he kept saying, "I'm going to be a dad," over and over. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry myself, so I ended up doing a bit of both. When he calmed down a bit, we talked more. He admitted he'd been feeling jealous and insecure about the thing with Caleb lately. He said he'd been wanting to talk to me about maybe ending that arrangement, but he didn't know how to bring it up without seeming controlling. Then he got really quiet and asked the question I'd been dreading. Could the baby be Caleb's? I explained the timeline and why that wasn't possible. To my immense relief, Robbie believed me right away. He said he trusts me completely and knows I wouldn't lie about something like this. We stayed up most of the night talking. Robbie's scared about becoming a father, but he's also excited. We both agreed we want to keep the baby. We talked about what this means for our future. Finishing grad school, finding more stable jobs, maybe even getting married sooner rather than later. Robbie brought up his own family history, which was something we'd never really discussed in depth before. His parents had him young, when they were still in college themselves. They struggled a lot, and Robbie has some complicated feelings about his childhood. He's determined to do better for our child, to be more present and supportive than his own father was. We also talked about my fears, about how this might affect my studies, about the physical challenges of pregnancy given my unique anatomy. Robbie was incredibly supportive, promising we'd figure it out together. He even offered to take a lighter course load next semester so he could take on more of the household responsibilities. The next morning, we decided to tell Caleb together. That conversation was awkward, to say the least. Caleb was shocked, but tried to be supportive. He congratulated us, but I could see the wheels turning in his head as he did the mental math about timing. Robbie told Caleb that given the new circumstances, we needed to end the casual arrangement between Caleb and me. Caleb nodded and said he understood completely. He seemed a little sad, but not upset. Here's where things took an unexpected turn. Later that day, Caleb came to us and said he'd been thinking. He offered to move out to give us more space as we prepare for the baby. Robbie and I were both taken aback. We told Caleb he didn't need to do that this was his home too. But Caleb insisted. He said he'd been thinking about getting his own place anyway, and this seemed like the right time. He even offered to keep paying his share of rent for a couple of months to give us time to find a new roommate if we wanted. I have to admit, I'm a little hurt by how quickly Caleb seemed ready to leave. I know our arrangement was supposed to be casual, but I thought we were friends too. Robbie says I'm being oversensitive. Thanks, hormones. But I can't help feeling like Caleb's running away. After Caleb left, Robbie and I had another long talk. We realized that we'd let our relationship get a little too comfortable, a little too routine. The pregnancy news has been a wake-up call in more ways than one. We've decided to really invest in our relationship to make sure we're on solid ground before the baby comes. We're going to start having regular date nights again, like we did when we first got together. Robbie's even talking about taking a couple's dance class, which should be hilarious given how uncoordinated we both are. We've also started making lists. So many lists. Things we need to buy for the baby, things we need to do to baby-proof the house, doctors we need to see. It's overwhelming, but also exciting. I'm still processing all of this. Everything's changing so fast. Robbie and I are cautiously excited about the baby, but also terrified. We have so much to figure out. And I'm sad about Caleb leaving, even though I understand why he thinks it's for the best. For now, we're taking things one day at a time. Robbie's been incredibly supportive, going with me to doctor's appointments and reading every pregnancy book he can get his hands on. We're trying to enjoy this exciting time while also planning for the huge changes ahead. I'll update again if anything major happens. Thanks again for all your support, Reddit. It really helped me face this head on. Update 2. Hey, Reddit. It's been a roller coaster few weeks since my last update, and I felt like I needed to share what's been going on. First, the good news. The pregnancy is going well. We had our first ultrasound, and hearing that little heartbeat was surreal. Robbie cried again. Happy tears. We're both still nervous, but also getting more excited as it starts to feel real. My doctors have been amazing, really going above and beyond to make sure everything's okay given my unique situation. They're monitoring me closely, but so far everything looks good. It's still weird to think that this body I've always thought of as broken is actually creating a whole new person. Now for the complicated stuff. Remember how Caleb offered to move out? Well, he found a place pretty quickly and moved out last weekend. The house feels weirdly empty without him. I keep expecting to hear his laugh from the other room or smell the terrible health smoothies he used to make every morning. The day Caleb moved out, Robbie and I had a long talk. He confessed that he'd always had complicated feelings about my arrangement with Caleb. He said he agreed to it initially because he wanted to be the cool, understanding boyfriend, but it had been eating at him more than he let on. Robbie also dropped a bombshell. Apparently, he and Caleb had hooked up once, about a year ago. It was a drunken, one-time thing that they both regretted immediately. They agreed never to speak of it again and to not tell me to avoid complicating things further. I was floored. I felt betrayed, not just by the act itself, but by the fact that they'd kept it from me for so long. Robbie was in tears, begging for forgiveness. He swore it meant nothing and that he's only ever loved me. I needed some space to process, so I went to stay with my sister for a few days. Being away gave me time to think. I realized that while I was hurt, I also understood how it happened. Our whole living situation was complicated and messy. We were all young and figuring things out. My sister was a godsend during this time. She let me rant and cry, but she also reminded me of all the good things about Robbie. She pointed out how supportive he's been throughout this pregnancy, how excited he is to be a dad. It helped put things in perspective. When I came back home, Robbie and I had another long talk. We both agreed that we'd let things get out of hand with the whole open relationship experiment. We decided to recommit to each other fully and to focus on building our future family. We also talked about trust and communication. I told Robbie how hurt I was that he kept the Caleb thing from me for so long. He apologized again and promised complete honesty going forward. We're going to work on rebuilding that trust. As for Caleb, things are awkward. He texted to check in about the pregnancy, which was nice. But there's definitely a distance there now. I think we all need some time and space to reset our boundaries. Robbie and I are trying to look forward now. We're turning Caleb's old room into a nursery. Robbie's mom is coming to visit next week to help us start planning. It's exciting, but also overwhelming sometimes. I still have moments where I panic about becoming a mom. Robbie does too. But we're facing it together. We're talking more openly than ever before about our fears, our hopes, our plans for the future. This whole experience has been a wake-up call. We're not kids playing house anymore. We're about to be parents. It's scary, but I think we're growing up fast. The previous content remains unchanged, adding the third update below. Update 3. Hey Reddit. I wasn't sure if I'd update again, but some things have happened that I need to get off my chest. The pregnancy is progressing well. We found out we're having a girl. Robbie is over the moon about having a daughter. He's already talking about tea parties and ballet lessons, while I gently remind him she might be more into skateboarding or bug collecting. We've been arguing good-naturedly about names. Robbie is pushing for Aurora, after his grandmother, while I'm leaning towards Lyra from my favorite childhood book. My body is changing in ways I never expected. It's strange and sometimes uncomfortable, but also kind of amazing. The doctors are still monitoring me closely, but so far everything looks good. They're calling me a medical marvel. Apparently there have only been a handful of cases like mine documented worldwide. But here's the complicated part. Caleb reached out to us last week. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking since he moved out. He confessed that he had developed real feelings for me over the past year, beyond just our casual arrangement. He said he knew it was bad timing, but he felt he needed to be honest. Caleb also said that the hookup with Robbie wasn't as casual as Robbie had made it out to be. According to Caleb, there were feelings involved on both sides. He said they had talked about possibly pursuing something more, but decided against it because of me. I was blindsided. I confronted Robbie about this, and he broke down. He admitted that he had been confused about his feelings for Caleb for a while. He swore that he loves me and wants our family, but he's been struggling with these conflicted emotions. I'm hurt and angry, but also confused. I care about both of them, and I hate seeing them in pain. But I also feel like I've been lied to and manipulated. The trust we've been trying to rebuild feels shattered all over again. Robbie has suggested couples therapy to work through this. Part of me wants to try, for the sake of our baby, if nothing else. But another part of me wonders if too much damage has been done. Can we really move past all of this? I'm staying with my sister again while I figure things out. Robbie calls every day to check on me and the baby. He's been sending me little care packages, my favorite snacks, books about pregnancy, even a stuffed animal for the baby. It's sweet, but it also makes everything more confusing. Caleb has respected my request for space and hasn't contacted me, but I know from mutual friends that he's not doing well. He's thrown himself into his music, writing song after song. Our friend who heard some of it says it's beautiful but heartbreaking. I'm trying to focus on staying healthy for my daughter. I've started prenatal yoga classes, which have been really helpful for managing stress. My sister comes with me sometimes, and it's nice to have that time together. I've also been thinking a lot about my own parents and how they handled challenges in their relationship. They went through some rough patches when I was growing up, especially around my medical issues. But they always presented a united front to me and my siblings. I remember overhearing them arguing late at night sometimes, but by morning they'd always work things out. I wonder if Robbie and I can find that kind of resilience. Can we put aside our own drama and focus on being good parents? Or would staying together for the baby's sake just lead to more pain down the line? I don't know what the future holds. Part of me wants to forgive Robbie, to believe that we can work through this and come out stronger. Another part of me is tired of being understanding, of making excuses for other people's behavior. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm focusing on my health, on preparing for this baby girl who's going to depend on me no matter what. I'm trying to find my own strength, separate from Robbie or Caleb or anyone else. Whatever happens with Robbie and Caleb, I know I'll be okay. I'm stronger than I realized. This baby has already taught me so much about myself, about what I'm capable of. I'm scared, but I'm also excited to meet her, to see who she becomes. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Writing this out has helped me process. I'll update if there are any major changes, but for now, I'm going to focus on taking care of myself and my daughter. Wish us luck.